Happy Monday. Happy Moon Day. Feliz Lunes, the first one of 2022. All right, third time's the charm, hopefully. Third time, third day, January 2022. I've had many a family member tell me I'm crazy. Another word for that would be a lunatic. So says Wikipedia, lunatic is an antiquated term referring to a person who is seen as mentally ill, dangerous, foolish, or crazy. Conditions once attributed to lunacy, and the word derives from lunaticus, or lunaticus, meaning of the moon or moonstruck. Again, happy first moon day, Monday, Lunes, from 2022. Apologies for all of you out there who assume that by the patterns on the shirt that I would be some sort of guitar maestro. Unfortunately, although it is something that I've always wanted to learn and pick up, that's about the extent of my guitar plucking knowledge. La cucaracha. La cucaracha, ya no puede caminar, porque le falta una pata para andar. Speaking of lunatics, I'm a big fan of, as we spoke of in earlier episodes, etymology. Language in general, as well as all the symbols and encoded knowledge that are embedded within. So just a quick glance through the English names for the days of the week, as well as the Spanish names of the days of the week. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I've learned down my Wikipedia rabbit holes about the origins of the names. So today, Monday, January 3rd, 2022, the start of some of the weeks, depending on what calendars you follow and whether or not the days of the week have any meaning to you. Monday, obviously, comes from moon. Lunes, luna, in Spanish, is the moon as well. So on this day, we celebrate or adore or commemorate or dedicate to the moon. Tuesday, the second day of the week, third depending on, again, where you start, is derived from Tyre, Tyre. Not only is that an ancient city in the Levant, the Fertile Crescent or the cradle of Western civilization, near present-day Jerusalem and Palestine and all of those territories. I think ancient Syria originally was a Phoenician city, but Tyre, Tuesday, Tyrs Day, comes from, I believe, Germanic roots, English being very much a derivative of Germanic and Latinate languages, all of which originally supposedly stem from one of the original 21 language families, which was Indo-European, somewhere around Afghanistan or northern India. Anyway, Tears Day, Tuesday, is from a Germanic root, Germanic folklore, Germanic myth of a god Tyr or Tyr. And this god is associated with some sorts of magic, some sorts of battling, war, etc. He's missing one of his hands. I believe it's his left, if I remember correctly. And that is associated with some of the Roman folklore, myths, etc., surrounding Mars, which, coincidentally enough, or not coincidence, but actually very much connected to, it's in Spanish, martes. So in English, Tuesday, Tyr's Day, Tears Day, and in Spanish, martes, day of Mars. So in Germanic, it's Tyr. In Latin derivatives or Romance languages, it's martes, Mars, god of war. So on Tuesday, day after lunacy, Monday, we celebrate or dedicate to the gods of war or some sorts of magic. Moving on to one of my favorite days, I'm sure a lot of you out there will agree, Hump Day, Wednesday, Odin's Day. Now, as we've talked about before, the game of telephone usually bends and transfigures and transforms the languages of old and the symbols of old into present-day languages that still survive and are used and continue to evolve. So Odin's Day, after many, many iterations of the game of telephone, became Odin's Day, Odin's Day, Odin's Day, Odin's Day, Odin's Day, Wednesday, Wednesday, Wednesday. Until today, we refer to it in English as Wednesday. But we still dedicate it to Odin, the Allfather, the Norse god who, in the mythology, lost his eye or gouged out his eye in order to gain a greater sight, omniscience, etc. I'm not sure if it was something to do with Ragnarok, but I feel like most Norse mythology does have to do with the world's end, a la Ragnarok. So I'm sure if you do your own Wikipedia dives, you'll find out a little bit more than I'm letting on here. So Odin's Day, in Spanish, Romance-derived language, Latin-derived language, again, still within the European languages, which stem from one of the original 21 language families, Indo-European from northern India, possibly around Afghanistan, that dispersed out into Arabia and Eastern and Western Europe, and turned into a whole bunch of different languages that we speak today. Anyway, Odin's Day, in Spanish, one of these derivative languages, one of the branches off of the trunk of this Indo-European tree, in Spanish is miércoles. Now, miércoles comes from Mercury, so if we follow the mythologies, the association is Odin is to Mercury, as Wednesday is to miércoles. Now, last night I did a little bit of a Wikipedia dive and found out that Mercury, the element, not the god or the planet, supposedly is still, unfortunately, very pervasive in these United States of America. The ways in which we find them in commercial goods are cosmetics, creams, mascaras, different makeups. And unfortunately, the reason that they're still used is that it's one of the cheapest ways in which you can preserve these commodities. And so the FDA, being focused mainly on the almighty dollar, as many people have since the conception of money, supposedly in ancient Sumeria way back in the day, decided that in order to keep the shelf life of these things longer and keep the cheap alternative, that they would still allow this very, very, very poisonous substance to be bought and sold throughout these lands. Because in the end, they'll gain money off of these products, and they'll also gain money off of the eventual hospitalization and treatment of heavy metal toxicity in their populace. So they see it as a win-win. Unfortunately, it is a lose-lose. Mercury apparently also is still used a little bit less, but was used primarily in dentistry for amalgams, which are tooth fillings that look like silvery substances within your cavities. I've shown many of people in my time that what I like to say is that most of my mouth is metal, and then I'll do a big ah to show them that unfortunately, in days past when I was a youth, I really hated to brush my teeth, thinking that teeth just fall out and come back in constantly throughout your life, not realizing that it's only one set that you lose as baby teeth, and then the next set is something that you keep for the rest of your life. So I didn't brush my teeth as a kid. I ate a lot of candy, got a lot of cavities, and because it's the cheap way of filling up cavities, my parents opted for the amalgam to be the filling. Now, speaking of mercury, 50% of the metal to make the amalgam cavity filling is mercury. The rest is copper and silver and some other metals. And in my deep dive last night, I was looking at the effects of mercury poison, toxicity, etc. And although various federal bureaucracies state that it's relatively harmless to have these 50% mercury amalgams in your mouth for however long you have them in your life, I highly doubt that there's zero repercussions from constantly chewing on, grinding away at, brushing away at, and possibly ingesting small trace amounts of this 50% mercury amalgam that I guess I'll have for however long I have them until I can find a safe and possible alternative to having teeth. But yeah, some of the damage that comes from heavy metal toxicity, including mercury, is irritability, depression, insomnia. Eventually, you get way deep down into the uglier side effects, including pinpricks and pain in your extremities. Eventually, you can't walk. You got all kinds of blood pressure issues. You got all kinds of liver and kidney issues. But it really damages the brain because it is a neurotoxin. And I'm not saying that necessarily I have gotten this off of the amalgams, but I do think that I've, in my days, breaking fluorescent lamps as a youth and various other silly acts as a child, I've probably ingested or come across a whole lot of mercury, a whole lot of lead, a whole lot of heavy metals that are very pervasive in our modern day, many, many years after we've dug into the flesh of Mother Earth in order to extract these minerals for various reasons, scientific or otherwise. So that is a long rambling way of saying that I have noticed in my mind or in my reflection of, days past that a couple of those, mainly depression, irritability, and insomnia, definitely hold sway in my life. And who knows whether or not it's genetic, because it does appear to be something inherited in my family tree, or whether it's just environmental, or to do with this crazy pandemic and quarantine that continues to drag on, even though I thought we were told that it would be 2 weeks maximum of this craziness back in February 2020. Anyway, point being, I do notice some of those symptoms in my life, and who knows if it's mercury poisoning or exposure or any other heavy metal toxicity, inheritance, or just environment, meaning ambience rather than physical environment. But mercury, now you know. If you don't know, now you know. So Hump Day, Odin's Day, Wednesday, Miércoles, Mercury's Day, the day that we dedicate to the god Mercury or the god Odin. Moving on to Thursday. This one's one of the easiest ones other than Monday, Moon Day association. Thursday comes to us from Thor's Day. Thor, the Norse god of thunder, and I don't know if he's necessarily, he is a warrior, but I don't know if he's associated with war in the mythology. But he's definitely associated with thunder, Mjolnir, his hammer of either thunder or lightning, depending on which came first, the chicken or the egg. Which, by the way, obviously the egg came before the chicken, because there were many, many fish and many, many lizards and dinosaurs that laid eggs millions of years before there was ever such a thing as a chicken. But I digress. Thursday in Spanish is jueves. Oh, Thursday is in English to jueves in Spanish, and jueves comes to us from Jupiter. So I'm assuming that in the Romance language derivative or in the Roman folklore mythology, they associated it with similar things to the things that we associate to Thor. So Jupiter, Thor, Thursday, jueves. Friday, I believe, is associated with Fricka. I'm not too familiar with her mythology and folklore and associations. In Spanish, it's viernes, which I believe, if I remember correctly, has something to do with summer. Fricka might be a goddess of the sun in some sort of association, or summer, or fecundity or fertility, as is viernes. But let me just quick do a Wikipedia plunge. Apologies for not coming prepared to any of these episodes, but I'm basically just kind of doing a stream of consciousness sharing of the knowledge and folklore that I've accumulated on my time on Earth. So, viernes, let's see. El viernes es el quinto día de la semana según el calendario gregoriano, siendo el primero el lunes y sexto para las culturas que consideran el domingo el primer día de la semana. El nombre de viernes proviene del latín, veneris dies, Día de Venus. Oh, see, I was completely wrong. So it's not viernes as in verano, which actually might be associated with Venus because it is a beautiful time of year, but it's associated with Venus. So Fricka in the Germanic Norse derivative day languages, and Venus in the Romance. So Friday associated with Venus and Fricka, two goddesses of days past. Now, moving on to the last one, depending again on which calendar you follow, days of the week, the weekend. We've got Saturday and Sunday, sábado y domingo. Saturday, pretty easy to see what the connotations are on that one. Saturn is Saturn. So instead of coming from a Germanic root, this one does stem more from the Latin side of English or the Roman side of English. So this is the day that we associate with Saturn. Not the planet so much, but the god of the folklore. In Spanish, sábado is the Sabbath. So that one actually comes to us from Semitic roots. Jewish traditions which are blended up with Christian traditions of today. Back in Roman Empire days, somewhere around 0 AD BC changeover, they probably still held the Sabbath in some sort of sacred focus. So the day before Sunday, the day of the sun, or in Spanish, domingo, day of God, they held as holy a la Jewish ancient traditions. So sábado, Sabbath, English Roman derivative, Saturday. So a lot of people probably worshipped Saturn way back in the day. And, well, not probably, but definitely worshipped Saturn way back in the day. And some sort of amalgamation of the Sabbath from Jewish Semitic traditions and Saturn traditions from Rome, which came from Greece, which came from ancient Egypt, frog hopping their way across the highway of time and space, comes to us as one of the best days of the week in which to enjoy yourself, live life to the fullest, and not be bogged down by the yokes of jobs and responsibilities. Moving on to the last day of the week or the first day of the week, depending on how you schedule. In English and Spanish only, because unfortunately those are the two languages that I know best. I wish I knew all of them equally well, but I have yet to master any of them, master myself, or delve into all the languages that I wish to learn while I still have breath in these lungs. Anyway, Sunday, day of the sun. Domingo, day of God. A lot of ancient peoples have a rich, complex, and long-lived worship of the sun. It's pretty easy to understand why. It's the brightest object in our sky. It completely changes what the night sky looks like versus the day sky looks like. It now, as we understand science, feeds life as we know it here on Earth. It allows for us not to be a frozen, solid, desolate wasteland with no possibility for life as we know it. Feeds photosynthesis, changes the seasons, and would clearly be something to worship as a early hominid, barely understanding the immensity, complexity, infinite wonder of the worlds around us. So, Sunday, last day or first day of the week, depending on how you look at it. In English, sun, having to do with Sol, our nearest star that feeds life as we know it here on Earth. Or Day of God, Domingo. Same association. But eventually, in the Christian tradition, it turned into having Yahweh, or whatever you want to call him, Jehovah, the one and only true God, etc. So say those traditions. That's the day of worship for them. So that's a brief, albeit jumbled, stumbled overview of what I've learned about the days of the week and their names in English and Spanish. And again, happy Moon Day, from one lunatic to another. Feliz Lunes, 3rd of January, 2022. Another reason that I really like Monday, Moon Day, the Luna, etc., has to do with the great and powerful impact that it has on life as we know it here on Earth. As per my understanding of the second edition of Cosmos, supposedly way back in the early formation of the planets around our sun, the Earth was not yet the Earth. It was a protoplanet that was impacted by some other protoplanet of semi-equal size named Theia. That impact resulted in a giant explosion of material outwards from the center of the impact, which remained in I doubt a similar orbit, but within the same realm of orbit as it had been as a molten protoplanet. Point being that the center of that explosion coalesced in what we now, in present day, call Earth, Tierra, and the shrapnel that exploded outwards but was still contained within the gravity well of this early Earth eventually coalesced and began to orbit the early semi-exploded Earth of that time and turned into the Moon, our satellite. Earliest one that I know of, that we know of, that also happens to be a shield as well as a sort of metronome of time and tides for us here on the Earth's surface. The reason that I say it's a shield, as we can see from the side that constantly faces the Earth, because its orbit and rotation about its axis are in such synchronicity so as to always have the same face of the Moon facing the Earth, and also the reverse side of the Moon facing away from the Earth. So as it orbits about its axis, as it rotates about its axis, that takes the same amount of time for it to orbit around the Earth, which means that the face that we see in the sky is the face that we will always see in the sky until time and space dictate otherwise. Point being, you can see a whole lot of pock marks on the Moon's surface from where we sit here on Earth. and I'm sure there's more on the other side. I have yet to visit, so I couldn't tell you from firsthand experience. Really, none of what I tell you is from firsthand experience, other than the things that I'll tell you from my own life. A lot of it is just hearsay, things I've picked up, things I've read, things I've heard, but I wish to echo out there into the void for whatever good it does. Hopefully, a lot. Hopefully, it just fills people with wonder and curiosity is piqued, so that you go out and do your own research and or tell a friend, tell a family member, and continue this human game of telephone. Point being, the moon, pockmarked. The reason it's pockmarked is because it has shielded the Earth from a great many asteroids, meteors, flotsam and jetsam of space back in the day. So who knows how many times we've come. Well, there are many recorded instances of where we've come close to extinction. But point is that the moon has helped us from some of those blows that would have landed here on Earth. Not all of them, but some of them. And the face that faces us, the side that faces us, supposedly looks like, depending on how you squint, how good your eyesight is, how good your imagination is, looks like the outline of a rabbit or a bunny, what have you. And that comes into play with a lot of folklore around the world. The ones that I know the best are Mesoamerican myths regarding the association of the moon with rabbits, or that outline of a rabbit in the moon, as well as ancient Chinese myths and other Asian myths surrounding the outline of a rabbit and the association of a rabbit with the moon. I didn't get a chance to talk about some of the ancient traditions or ancient past of Asia, mostly because I'm not as familiar with it as I would be with some of the Western tradition that's widely taught here in the United States, as well as some of my own education within the Mesoamerican past and Latin American past that I've been embarking on in the past few years. But something interesting to note that I came across the other day while studying up on things that pique my curiosity is that one of the creation myths of ancient China has to do with a brother and sister god pair, god pair, that have the legs of snakes and were responsible for the creation of humanity, both in their mind aristocratic humanity and just commoner drudgery labor force humanity. I don't agree with that sort of thing, but yeah, it is what it is, and I'm only retelling what I've heard and read. So don't shoot the messenger, please. So this brother and sister goddess pair with the legs of snakes were charged with or decided to create humanity, but the only way that they could do that was by coupling. And so they hid their faces in shame while they ended up making most of the humans the way rabbits make rabbits. A lot of hump days. Pardon the pun. Anyway, it coincides with a lot of early human myths that survive to present day, wherein you see humans stemming from a brother-sister pair or cousin pairs, or a la Bible with the, or ancient Hebrew Semitic traditions of Judaism with Adam and Eve. You notice a lot of correlation with these ancient myths of humanity's population, creation, proliferation. And one thing that I assume from things that I've heard recently and read recently is that a lot of that has to do with the stories that we tell ourselves regarding the various bottlenecks of humanity that have occurred within hominid past. Now, there are several times in history, within human history, a la hominids, where various catastrophes have bottlenecked the population down to a very low number. Be that through asteroid impacts, volcanic explosions, various cataclysmic events along those lines. Um, there have been many times where the population has dwindled down to a few thousand. I think the smallest number that I've heard of myself is around 7,000 human beings after some Indonesian volcanic explosion that devastated the world and life on it. So, long story, longer and more convoluted, my thought process about a lot of these myths involving the seeding of humanity through either a brother and sister or cousins or one or two beginning humans probably stems from that time where there were so few humans left on Earth in various pockets all around, the continents, that it was probably a story that either just through historicity telling, oral traditions, or an explanation of why it was necessary. Uh, these were stories that people told that last until present day, and snippets of myth that explained why it was necessary for people that were related to have offspring. It's very taboo, I'm assuming, way back in the day and also present day, but there was some gray area where it was necessary for humanity to survive as a species. So that's my interpretation of it anyway. Who knows if it's true? Hopefully I get a time machine someday in the future so that I can go back and check it out for myself. Not the actual coupling, but, the world surrounding the myth. Anyway, going back to the moon, and one of the reasons that I consider myself a lunatic, moonstruck, something that I know a little bit more about than the ancient Chinese myths or the ancient Asian myths surrounding the moon are the Mesoamerican myths regarding the moon. So the rabbit in the moon, the shape or outline of a bunny, is also associated with the moon goddess, which I believe in Maya tradition, or possibly Aztec Nahuatl tradition, Mexican tradition, is named Mayahuel. So Mayahuel is the goddess of the moon, who is also the goddess of agave and pulque, which is the beer derived from agave nectar. And she is connected to these 400 rabbits of drunkenness and partying and fun, called the Sensonhuitznawa, I believe. That might be another 400 people that are some sort of astrological myth folklore. But there are 400 rabbits that are associated with drunkenness, that are associated with the moon goddess Mayahuel, and associated with the pre-tequila, pre-mezcal liquor of the gods called pulque. Now, the folklore that I've heard associated with it comes from an ancient myth, I'm assuming, but something that I'll relay to you now is that the early Mesoamericans paid very close attention to the natural world around them, as did many, if not all, early hominids that had nothing but the skies, the sun, the plants, the animals, the waters around them to fill their days with curiosity and wonder. They noticed, these Mesoamericans of ancient times, that rabbits would act very funny after eating rotten agave. So they paid close attention to what was happening and noticed that, it was very common to see rabbits hopping around, falling over, having a lot of sex after partaking of rotten agave hearts containing rotten agave nectar, which, as we know nowadays, is nature's process of fermentation, which gives us pulque, which eventually gave us tequila and mezcal after alchemy, alcohol processes reached the Americas. But the myth and the folklore tell us that way back in the past in Mesoamerica, they noticed this magic elixir from Mayahuel, the goddess of agave, the goddess of Pulque, the goddess of the moon, They noticed that her messengers or her associated critters, the rabbits, were the true discoverers of this fermented beverage. And therein lies the myth of the creation or the discovery of Pulque in ancient Mesoamerica, and why it's associated with the moon. I believe it has to do with the moon being one of the best metronomes or timekeepers for the Mesoamericans, something that they constantly relied on in order to measure the passage of time around them. And it probably has to do with the growth of agave, as well as the reproductive cycle of rabbits that partake of rotten agave and go off into their various hump days. Quick intermission. This coffee is delicious, but it does take some time to relieve myself of the crystals that it gives me. So, BRB, and look forward to talking more about all the crazy things I've heard, read, and learned about. Well, that bathroom break ended up being a longer intermission than I expected. I also took the time to break my fast, had some food, and took a walk with the dogs. Not a euphemism, actually exercised my canines. And we're back. Earlier I was stumbling around trying to figure out how to say there were crystals in my bladder, and how, although the coffee was very good, it was also very efficient at doing what it does, which is being a diuretic. And on thinking about diuretics, bladders, etc., I started remembering things about ancient hominids, as per usual, and remembered that some of the earliest inflatable balloons or bouncy balls would be pig bladders. And then that led me down the thought process of remembering different divination technologies that arose in early human history, some of which were created by the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Sumerians, and eventually made their way to Egypt, Greece, and ancient Rome. One of which was very popular, which involved the correct interpretation of the various shapes and forms of sheep's liver. So, from having a bladder full of coffee to walking the dogs, I made my train of thought arrive at various stops along the mental ether, and came down to divination technologies, as well as early use of bladders and skins to create the first water skins, water bags, vessels in which to carry various liquids, which I guess makes sense because when you do your first autopsies on animals, realize which one of those organs is the one that carries the urine inside of the body without leaking. You think, well, if it carries one liquid inside of a body without leaking, it might be useful to carry other liquids. And in fact, it was. And still is, I'm sure, in various nomadic tribes throughout the world. Before I went to intermission, I can't remember specifically what I was talking about. I think I was talking about the moon and various myths and folklores around the world that revolve around her as she revolves around us. And now that we're back, I'd like to get into some of the knowledge that I've gleaned over the years regarding the impact of the moon on not just the Earth, but also things on the earth, including life and the oceans. I remember being awed by the knowledge that was given to me by probably a middle school teacher or mentor of some sort, that the world's oceans tides were mostly influenced by the gravitational pull of the moon as it rotated about the Earth. Later on, maybe a few years ago, but much later than middle school, as time went on, I started learning about the various connections to the moon and living things on Earth. I was fascinated by the idea that there were certain plants and flowers that only bloomed in the moon's light. Of course, the light that the moon shines down upon us is just a reflection of the light that hits it from our sun, Sol. But I also was fascinated to find out that the gravitational pull of the moon not only influences the tides of the mighty oceans all around, but also possibly has an effect on the gestation period for human beings. One interesting thing to note is that the moon, I believe, returns to the same location about its orbit around Earth around every 9 months or so. I'm not quite sure on the numbers. That's something probably for a later podcast once I actually write down some notes and structure it a little bit more. But the 9-month gestation period correlates to some lunar phenomenon regarding its orbit around the Earth, and I believe that's around how long it takes for it to arrive to the same point in its orbit around the Earth. So not only does it affect the water of the oceans, it affects the water of the womb as well. Something magical and beautiful and mystical to understand. Speaking of Mesoamerican connections to folklore, calendrics, time, and the moon, I mentioned briefly earlier that the moon was one of the metronomes or timekeepers that the Mayans and Aztecs and all of the other Mesoamerican and South American natives used in order to create their calendar systems, their ritual calendars, as well as their secular calendars. And one of the things that I recently found out was that the 365.22 days that is approximated by the calculations of the ancient Maya were broken into, I believe, 260 and 105 days. The 260 days were their sacred or religious calendar, and the 105 were the additional days that were non-secular. Secular? Whatever the non-religious days were. But that they correlate to roughly about the gestation time for a human being, as well as the gestation germination time for maize, corn. So those were obviously two very important things that they kept track of in their time creating, or rather, the word I'm looking for is developing the ancient grain of maize, which at some point in the distant past resembled the baby corn that you get in Chinese food. They developed it and developed it and developed it and kept genetically modifying it by constant sowing and planting and transplanting and crossbreeding, etc., until it arrived to the size and nutrition and caloric value of today's corn, which happens to be the most widely grown food crop on Earth. And it also was an incredibly important staple crop in ancient Mesoamerican past, which allowed its empires and civilizations to attain the population increase that they had before the time of conquest by the Europeans around 1492 or 1542, if I'm remembering correctly. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying that they were very interested in time. Mostly they used the moon's motions in order to keep accurate time, as well as the precessions of the various celestial bodies, stars, planets, galaxies, etc., in order to create one of the most accurate and impressive artistic calendars that human beings have ever created. I got lost there a little bit, sidetracked as per usual. I'm still learning how to have the thoughts in my brain translate into words that emanate from my voice box and mouth, and some things get lost in translation. But thank you again for bearing with me and joining me on this adventure, this stream of consciousness, this train of thought. All aboard. There was something else that I wanted to bring up, and I'm not quite sure what it is, but we'll get to it, or we won't. Oh, Stand By Me. So that was one of the other things that I kind of know how to pluck down on a guitar. Kind of, not really, but one of two in total things that I know how to pluck out as far as guitar tunes go. And I haven't seen the movie, but I hear that there is a part in the movie Stand By Me where the kids are going through a creek or a river or a stream of some sort, body of water, and they come out covered in leeches. So thinking of ancient technologies and bladder skins and divination via the shapes and formations of sheep's livers back in the day, plus that song led me to the thoughts revolving ancient medicine, and how back in the day a lot of people thought that the best way to alleviate or cure people of various diseases or illnesses of the body and mind was to leech them out, leech the bad blood out of people, literally via attaching leeches to various parts of their bodies and having the sickness drain out that way. I cringe to think about that. I've only had one parasite that I know of in my life, and it was a tick. I went looking around various forests a fall a couple of years ago, right after rain, and I was looking and foraging for various mushrooms. Mostly I was looking for my first psychedelic trip, and I wanted to find my own magic mushrooms out in the woods in order to more fully connect with the experience. But unfortunately, I didn't find any mushrooms, but I did find a tick. I found a tick right in my collarbone about half a day later, which was unnerving, to say the least. I felt more than violated and possessed. And although I tried my best to tweezer the thing out whole, so as not to split it apart or have it vomit its poison toxins inside of me, I only managed to pinch off its nether regions. I can't remember what it is. It's not thorax, it's not abdomen, it's one of those things, but insect butt. I managed to pinch that off, and unfortunately the head stayed inside my collarbone, and I was freaking out constantly for about a month afterwards, thinking that I'd infected myself with Lyme disease on my journey to find psychedelics. So thankfully, I don't think I got Lyme disease. I haven't visited the doctor during this entire pandemic for various reasons, mostly a fear of getting the old coronavirus. But as far as I can tell, I don't seem to have developed any of the symptoms related to Lyme disease. So close call. Thankfully, nothing happened other than me being very, very disturbed by having a parasite live off of me for a brief spell. So I really, really hope that I never get anything like hookworm or leeches or any other various parasites like botflies digging their way into my flesh, because just having one tick in my life is enough for me. Thank you very much. No, thank you. Um, yeah, I, I don't know if we'll ever get to the point technology wise where we have some sort of force field or second skin, some sort of impervious shield to the world around us. That's something that I've often thought of when I contemplate going to the Amazon rainforest and exploring. It's something that I definitely want to do, I wish to do, I hope to do, but I'm also incredibly wary of the various ways that nature can bite one in the ass, either figuratively or literally. And when my mind runs along the thoughts of visiting the Amazon rainforest or even Australia, places with lots and lots of natural ways for one to meet an untimely demise or an uncomfortable illness. Um, I often think it would be wonderful if at some point in the not too distant future, hopefully, so that I can enjoy it, we come up with some impervious skin with which to safely travel uh, dangerous parts of this world. So it would be wonderful to get to walk around, say, the Amazon rainforest, and even if you see or if you have vipers or mosquitoes or botflies or various parasites or predators trying their best to get into the nutrients hidden away in our largest organ, the skin, it would be pretty cool to just brush them off like they were nothing more than fruit flies. Um, then again, I have played various video games enough and found cheat codes uh, that basically make you impervious in a game. And I do understand the idea that without risk, uh, much of the joy and spice of life is lost. But I have very much enjoyed god modes and cheats and hacks in video games almost as much, if not more, than playing with the regular old rules where one can try and fail, try and fail, and try and fail again. So I'd still be very, very interested in trekking through the most dangerous parts of this world with some sort of force field or impervious second skin. At least to the point where I wouldn't have to worry about parasites digging into my flesh. Um, if it isn't strong enough to ward off a jaguar attack or two, well, then I'll still have to be a mite bit cautious and maybe travel in company rather than alone. But as with almost anything in this life, I believe that things are better enjoyed with company. So the more the merrier. Um, I think my intermission lasted a little bit too long, and now that I'm running out of steam on this third journey into uh, attempted eloquence, I'd like to leave you with a happy new year. Can't believe that I forgot to say that at the outset. The phoenix has risen from its own ashes once again. 2021 turned into 2022. Here we are on Moon Day, Lunes, Monday, and I'm moonstruck, awestruck, and filled with wanderlust as we enter into a bright new year. I hope it finds you all with good health, happiness, sense of wonder and curiosity, and I thank you again for spending time with me on this journey along a stream of consciousness. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.